Marcus Hayes stood outside Bella Vista, rain misting his face, hand trembling as he checked his phone. 7:58 p.m. $47 in his wallet. Every cent he could spare. His daughter Sophie was with his sister tonight. This was supposed to be his chance. Through the foggy glass, couples laughed over wine and pasta. He didn't belong in there, never had. Sitters p.m. Still waiting. 8:07 p.m. His phone buzzed. The message hit like a fist to the gut. LOL, did you really think I'd show up? My girls, and I needed entertainment tonight. You looked so desperate in your photos. Hope you enjoy eating alone, loser. Marcus gripped the table edge inside the restaurant, vision blurring. Not from tears. He wouldn't cry. From shame so deep it crushed the air from his lungs. Across the dining room, a woman in a charcoal blazer watched everything. The nervous arrival, the hopeful waiting, the phone that drained color from his face, the man breaking apart in real time. Victoria Chen set down her wine glass and made a decision that would change 3 lives forever. What happens when a stranger decides you matter? When one moment of kindness rewrites your entire story. This isn't just about a dinner date gone wrong. It's about what we deserve when we've forgotten our own worth. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Marcus sat frozen, the phone face down on the white tablecloth like it might burn him if he touched it again. His hands pressed flat against the table, knuckles white, fighting the urge to just stand up and walk out. Run out. Disappear before anyone else noticed the pathetic man sitting alone at a table set for 2. The words kept replaying in his head. Desperate. Loser. Entertainment. 5 years. 5 years since Sarah had left, walking out when Sophie was barely 1 year old. 5 years of working construction during the day and warehouse shifts at night. 5 years of telling his daughter that Daddy wasn't hungry, that the peanut butter sandwich was enough, that they were doing just fine. 5 years of convincing himself that maybe someday he'd deserve something more than just survival. Tonight was supposed to be that someday. The smell of garlic bread drifted from a nearby table. His stomach twisted with hunger. He hadn't eaten since yesterday's apple, splitting his lunch with Sophie because her school cafeteria portions were never enough and he couldn't afford to pack more. A burst of laughter erupted from the couple to his left. The woman leaned into her partner, whispering something that made him grin. They looked easy together, comfortable, like people who'd never had to choose between paying the electric bill and buying groceries. Marcus's server appeared at the edge of his vision. Young guy, maybe mid-20s, with kind eyes and a professional smile that didn't quite hide his awareness that something was wrong. "Sir, are you ready to order?" Marcus's throat was dry. He picked up the menu with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, scanning prices that made his chest tight. The cheapest pasta was $19. Just water. He'd order just water and the cheapest thing and get out of here as fast as possible. "The spaghetti carbonara, please. And water, just water." "No problem. I'll get that right in for you." The server started to turn away, then paused. Something in his expression shifted, softened. "I'll bring you some bread while you wait. On the house." Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. When the server left, he pulled out his phone again, thumb hovering over the message. He should delete it, should block Melissa's number and forget this whole nightmare ever happened. Instead, he opened his photos. Sophie grinned up at him from the screen, gap-toothed and joyful, holding up a drawing of the solar system she'd made at school. Her handwriting across the top, "For Daddy, the best dad in the universe." His eyes burned. He blinked hard, willing himself not to fall apart in the middle of this restaurant. 25 feet away, Victoria Chen watched the entire scene unfold with the focused attention she usually reserved for board meetings and contract negotiations. She'd noticed him 20 minutes ago when he'd walked in. the nervous energy radiating off him, the way he'd checked his phone every 30 seconds, the hope written so clearly across his face it had been almost painful to witness. She'd watched him wait, watched that hope slowly curdle into confusion, then anxiety, then something worse. Watched him check his phone one more time and go completely still, the color draining from his face like someone had opened a valve. Victoria knew that look. She'd worn it herself once 3 years ago, standing in front of her board of directors while her business partner and ex-husband presented their merger strategy. The strategy she'd developed. The one he'd stolen and claimed as his own. The moment she'd realized that the man she'd loved, the man she'd built a company with, had been using her all along. She knew what public humiliation felt like. Knew what it was like to sit in a room full of people and feel completely alone. Her Pinot Noir sat untouched in front of her. The quarterly reports on her tablet had lost all meaning. She'd come here straight from the office just like she did 4 nights a week, ordering expensive wine and a meal she'd barely taste while responding to emails and reviewing projections. This was her life. This carefully controlled, meticulously managed existence where every hour was accounted for and every decision maximized efficiency. Cloud9 Solutions had 200 employees, annual revenue of $50 million, and a reputation as one of Portland's most innovative tech companies. She'd built it from nothing, fought for every inch of success, and somewhere along the way she'd forgotten how to be anything except a CEO. Victoria watched the server approach Marcus's table, watched the brief exchange, watched the young man walk away with concern etched on his face. She made a decision. Catching the server's eye, she gestured him over. He arrived promptly, notepad ready. "That gentleman at table 7, Victoria said quietly, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to being heard. "I'd like to cover his meal." The server followed her gaze, understanding dawning in his expression. "Of course, ma'am. Don't tell him who. Just let him know it's been taken care of." "That's incredibly kind of you." Victoria's jaw tightened. "It's not kind. It's the bare minimum of human decency. There's a difference." The server nodded slowly, something shifting in his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or respect. "I'll let him know." Victoria returned her attention to her tablet, but the numbers swam meaninglessly across the screen. Her heart was beating faster than it should. What was she doing? She didn't do this. Didn't approach strangers, didn't pay for their meals, didn't get involved in other people's private disasters. Except she couldn't look away. Couldn't unsee what she'd witnessed. Couldn't pretend she hadn't watched a man's world collapse in the middle of a crowded restaurant while everyone else went on eating and laughing and living their uncomplicated lives. 5 minutes later, she watched the server return to Marcus's table. Watched Marcus's confusion, his immediate protest, his scanning the room trying to identify his anonymous benefactor. His eyes passed over her twice without recognition. Why would they land on her? She was just another solo diner, another woman in business attire having dinner alone. Marcus's pasta arrived 15 minutes later. Victoria watched him stare at it like he wasn't sure it was real. Watched him pick up his fork with trembling hands. Watched him take that first bite and close his eyes for just a moment, and she knew. Knew this wasn't just about the meal. This was about something deeper. Something that mattered in ways that had nothing to do with food. She gave him 30 minutes. Let him eat in peace. Let him have that small grace without the weight of gratitude or explanation. But the entire time something pulled at her. Some invisible thread connecting her to this stranger's pain. Finally, Victoria stood. Straightened her blazer. Walked the 15 steps across the restaurant floor to his table. Marcus looked up when her shadow fell across the white tablecloth. His eyes were still red-rimmed, still carrying the rawness of recent tears he'd fought not to shed. "Is this seat taken?" Confusion flickered across his face. He glanced at the obviously empty chair, then back at her. No, may I? She was already pulling out the chair, already sitting down with the easy confidence of someone who'd spent years walking into rooms where she wasn't wanted, and making them hers anyway. Just for a moment. He nodded, throat working, clearly trying to figure out what was happening. Victoria folded her hands on the table, studying him with the directness that made her employees nervous and her competitors cautious. But there was no calculation in it now. Just curiosity. Just the desire to really see the person behind the pain. I'm Victoria. Vic to friends. Marcus. His voice came out rough, scraped raw by emotion and embarrassment. You paid for my meal. It wasn't a question. Victoria didn't bother denying it. I did. Why? The question hung between them, heavy with all the things he wasn't saying. Why would you care? Why would you waste money on someone like me? Why would you see me when I feel invisible? Victoria leaned forward slightly. Because you looked like you were having the worst night of your life, and nobody else seemed to give a damn. Marcus flinched. A bitter laugh escaped him, sharp and painful. You saw all that, huh? I saw enough. Victoria's voice gentled just slightly. Whoever stood you up is cruel. That's not normal, Marcus. That's not okay. His eyes went glassy again. He blinked hard, jaw clenched. I thought... He stopped, shook his head. Doesn't matter what I thought. It matters. Does it? The words came out bitter. I'm a 37-year-old single father working construction because it's all I'm qualified for. I saved up $47 to take someone to dinner because I thought maybe, just maybe I deserved something good. Turns out I was wrong. Victoria's chest tightened. You weren't wrong. Yeah, because the message I got said I was desperate. Said I looked pathetic. Said she and her friends needed entertainment tonight. Marcus's hands curled into fists on the table. And you know what the worst part is? She's probably right. She's not. You don't know that. You don't know me. I know enough, Victoria said firmly. I know you showed up. I know you waited. I know you're sitting here eating a meal you can barely afford because someone decided you were worth humiliating for fun. That's not pathetic, Marcus. That's courage. He stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. Courage. Yes, showing up when you're scared, trying when you've been hurt. That takes courage most people don't have. Silence stretched between them. Marcus studied her face, searching for something. Pity, maybe. Condescension. Some sign that she was mocking him too, just in a more sophisticated way. He found none of it. I can't pay you back, he said finally. Not right now, but I want to. I will eventually. Stop. Victoria's voice was firm, but not unkind. This wasn't a loan. No debt, no strings, no obligation. Then what was it? One human recognizing another human's worth. That's all. Marcus's voice dropped to barely a whisper. I don't feel very worth it right now. That's exactly why I came over. Because you need to hear this. Victoria held his gaze, refusing to let him look away. You matter, Marcus. Not because of your bank account or your job or whether some stranger thinks you're worth their time. You matter because you're here, because you exist, because you're a person who deserves basic human decency. The words hit him like a physical blow. His breath caught. His eyes filled with tears he couldn't hold back this time. He stopped, swallowed hard. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Victoria's expression softened. Do you have kids? The question seemed to ground him. A daughter. Sophie, she's 6. Something shifted in Victoria's face. Warmth, maybe. Understanding. Then let me ask you this. If Sophie needed something and a stranger helped her, would you want her to feel indebted? Would you want her carrying that weight? No, of course not. Then why are you carrying it? Victoria leaned forward. You're allowed to accept help without making it a transaction. You're allowed to let someone do something kind without turning it into a debt you have to repay. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Marcus stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly something in his shoulders loosened. Not much, but enough. I've been where you are. Victoria continued, her voice quieter now. Not exactly, but close enough. I know what it's like to feel like you're not enough, like you're failing at the basic task of being human. And I know what it's like when someone sees that and doesn't look away. What happened? When someone saw you, I mean. Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. I didn't let them help. I was too proud, too convinced that accepting anything from anyone was weakness, and I regretted it for years after. Why? Because that person was trying to tell me the same thing I'm trying to tell you now. That struggling doesn't make you strong. That accepting help doesn't make you weak. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let someone else carry part of the weight for a while. The restaurant hummed around them. Conversations and laughter and the clink of silverware against plates. But at their table everything was still, quiet, real in a way that felt almost sacred. Tell me about your daughter, Victoria said after a moment. The change of subject was deliberate. Marcus grabbed onto it gratefully, his face transforming at the mention of Sophie. She's everything. Smart, way too smart probably. She notices things, asks questions I don't always know how to answer. Like what? Like why we can't afford the apartment with the playground. Like why I'm always tired. Like why Mommy left, and if it was her fault. Marcus's voice cracked on the last word. She's 6 years old, and she thinks her mother left because of something she did. Victoria's expression went carefully neutral, but her eyes betrayed her. Pain. Recognition. How long has it been? 5 years. Sarah left when Sophie was barely walking. Said she couldn't do it anymore. The crying, the diapers, the way our whole lives had to revolve around this tiny person who needed everything and gave nothing back. He stopped jaw working. So she left, and it's been just us ever since. That must be incredibly difficult. It's not difficult. Marcus's laugh was hollow. It's impossible. Except I don't have the luxury of calling it impossible, so I call it difficult instead. And I keep going because what else can I do? The words came faster now, like a dam breaking. I work construction during the day. Sometimes I pick up warehouse shifts at night. I lie to my daughter about whether I've eaten because her nutrition matters more than mine. I buy clothes from Goodwill and tell myself it doesn't matter that they don't fit right. I take buses across town because my car died 3 months ago and I can't afford to fix it. He gestured vaguely at the restaurant around them. And I tried tonight. I tried to maybe have something for myself for once. Something that wasn't about survival or sacrifice or just getting through another day. And look how that turned out. Victoria didn't look away, didn't flinch or offer platitudes or tell him it would get better. She just listened, and somehow that was exactly what Marcus needed. "You're not a failure," Victoria said when he finally fell silent. "You're exhausted. There's a difference. Feels the same from where I'm sitting. I know, but feelings aren't facts." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Can I tell you something? And I need you to actually hear it, not just listen and dismiss it because you think I'm just being nice." Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. "What you're doing, raising a child alone, working multiple jobs, sacrificing everything so she can have what she needs, that's not failing. That's the opposite of failing. That's showing up every single day for someone who depends on you even when it's crushing you, even when you have nothing left to give. That's not weakness, Marcus. That's the strongest thing a person can do. Then why does it feel like I'm drowning? Because strength doesn't mean you don't struggle. It just means you keep your head above water even when every wave tries to pull you under. Victoria's voice was gentle but firm. And tonight, someone threw you a life preserver. That's all this was. Not charity, not pity. Just one person seeing another person struggling and thinking I can help with that. I can make this one thing easier. Marcus closed his eyes, letting the words settle. When he opened them again, Victoria was still there. Still watching him with that same unwavering attention that made him feel seen in a way he hadn't been in years. "Why are you being so nice to me? You don't know me. I'm just some guy who got stood up on a date." "You're not just anything," Victoria replied. "And I'm being nice because that's what people should do. See each other, help each other. Not because there's something in it for them, but because that's what it means to be human." The server appeared at the edge of their table, tactfully waiting. Victoria glanced up, then back at Marcus. "I should let you finish your meal." "Wait." The word escaped before Marcus could think better of it. "Would you, you've already been so kind and I don't want to impose, but would you want to stay? Just for a little while? I don't—" He trailed off, not sure how to finish the sentence. "I don't want to be alone. I don't want this moment to end. I don't want to go back to my life where nobody sees me." Victoria settled back into her chair, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I'd like that." And just like that, the worst night of Marcus Hayes's life began to transform into something else entirely. Not a rescue, not a salvation. Just two people sharing space, sharing conversation, sharing the simple act of seeing each other as worth the effort. They talked for another hour. Victoria told him about Cloud9 Solutions, about the exhaustion of being in charge all the time, about how success had brought her everything except the one thing she'd wanted most: connection. Marcus talked about Sophie, about his sister Jessica, about the small moments of joy that punctuated the overwhelming difficulty of his life. About the way Sophie's face lit up when she learned something new. About how she still crawled into his sleeping bag on the floor when she had nightmares. About the fierce love he felt for this small person who'd made his life impossibly hard and infinitely worth living. Neither of them solved anything. Neither of them fixed the fundamental challenges they faced. But for those 60 minutes in a Portland restaurant surrounded by the noise of other people's lives, they reminded each other what it felt like to matter to someone, to be heard, to exist as more than their struggles. When they finally stood to leave, Victoria handed Marcus a business card. Her information was printed on the front in crisp black letters. On the back, in handwriting that was surprisingly delicate, she'd written, "You matter. If you ever need anything," Victoria said, "or if you don't need anything but you want to talk to someone who won't think you're pathetic for admitting life is hard sometimes, call me." Marcus took the card, his fingers closing around it like it was precious, which maybe it was. "Thank you for everything, for seeing me when I felt invisible. You were never invisible, Marcus. You just needed someone to prove it." They parted ways on the sidewalk outside Bella Vista. Victoria heading toward the parking garage, Marcus toward the bus stop. He watched her go, this stranger who'd become something more in the space of an evening, and felt something he hadn't felt in 5 years. Hope. Not the fragile, desperate hope that had brought him to the restaurant in the first place. Something sturdier, the kind built on the foundation of being known, being seen, being valued by someone who had no reason to lie. His phone buzzed. A text from Jessica. "Mia fell asleep on the couch. Take your time. Hope you're having a good night." Marcus smiled. really smiled for the first time in hours. He typed back, "I am. Better than I expected." And standing there on a cold Portland street, holding a business card that felt like a promise and carrying the memory of a meal that had tasted like grace, Marcus Hayes began to believe that maybe he wasn't as alone as he'd thought. Maybe sometimes the world gave you exactly what you needed, right when you'd stopped believing you deserved it. The business card lived in Marcus's wallet for 3 days before he worked up the courage to look at it again. Not because he'd forgotten about Victoria. She'd occupied his thoughts almost constantly since that Friday night. The way she'd looked at him without pity. The way she'd listened like his words mattered. The way she'd somehow made him feel less alone in a crowded restaurant than he'd felt in 5 years of actual solitude. But examining the card meant deciding what to do about it. And deciding required a kind of bravery he wasn't sure he possessed. Monday morning found him on a construction site in southeast Portland, hauling lumber in the October cold, while his mind replayed their conversation for the 100th time. His hands knew the work without his brain's involvement. Measure, cut, nail, repeat. The rhythm should have been meditative, but his thoughts kept circling back to the same question. What if he called, and she actually wanted to talk to him? What if their conversation hadn't been a one-time kindness, but the beginning of something real? What if he was so busy protecting himself from disappointment that he was throwing away the first genuine connection he'd felt in years? "Brooks, you planning to move that lumber or just stare at it?" His foreman's voice cut through the memory sharp with impatience. "Sorry, Mike. On it." Marcus hefted the 2x4s, his muscles protesting the weight after a weekend of restless sleep and too many thoughts. The physical labor was usually a relief, a way to shut off his brain and let his body do what it was trained to do. But today every movement felt mechanical, his mind stubbornly elsewhere. During lunch break, sitting on a stack of plywood with his peanut butter sandwich and thermos of coffee, Marcus pulled out his wallet. The card was tucked behind his expired driver's license. Thick, cream-colored paper, somehow elegant despite being slightly worn at the edges from 3 days of handling. Victoria Chen, CEO, Cloud9 Solutions. A phone number, an email address, and handwritten on the back in neat script, "You matter, call me." 3 words that had kept him awake at night, turning them over in his mind like stones he was trying to read in the dark. "Who's the fancy lady, Carlos?" One of the younger guys on the crew peered over his shoulder before Marcus could put the card away. "Nobody, just someone I met." Marcus tucked the card back into his wallet, heat climbing his neck. "Must be somebody if you're carrying her card around like a lucky charm." Carlos grinned, nudging him with an elbow. "She pretty? It's not like that." "Sure it's not. That's why you've been walking around with your head in the clouds for 3 days. Carlos took a bite of his burrito, still grinning. "You should call her man. What's the worst that could happen?" Marcus could think of several worst-case scenarios, actually. She could realize she'd made a mistake, that he'd misread her kindness for something more than it was. She could be busy important, too occupied with her actual life to waste time on someone like him. She could answer the phone and not remember who he was, this forgettable man she'd pitied at a restaurant. Or she could answer and everything could be exactly as terrible as he feared, and he'd have to face the confirmation that Friday night had been an aberration. A moment of grace that couldn't be replicated in the harsh light of ordinary days. "The worst that could happen is I make a fool of myself," Marcus said finally. "Brother, you're already making a fool of yourself by not calling. At least if you call, you'll know." Carlos stood crumpling his burrito wrapper. "Life's too short to wonder what if you know." The afternoon stretched on repetitive and exhausting. Evan's hands knew the work without his brain's involvement, but his thoughts kept circling back to the same question. What if, by the time his shift ended at 5, Marcus had made and unmade the decision to call at least a dozen times? He rode the bus to Jessica's apartment, picked up Sophie, and listened to her excited chatter about the solar system project she was working on at school, all while the card seemed to burn through his wallet and into his hip. "Daddy, are you listening?" Sophie tugged on his sleeve as they walked the 6 blocks to their apartment building. "Of course, sweetheart. You were telling me about Saturn's rings." "No, that was 5 minutes ago. Now I'm talking about how Mrs. Patterson said I can present my project to the whole class." She looked up at him with those serious dark eyes, too knowing for someone who should still believe in uncomplicated joy. "You seem distracted." 7 years old, and she could read him better than most adults. "Just thinking about grown-up stuff. Nothing for you to worry about." "Is it about the date you had on Friday?" Sophie asked, her voice careful. "Aunt Jess said you went to meet a nice lady." Marcus's chest tightened. He'd managed to avoid this conversation over the weekend, deflecting Jessica's questions and Sophie's curiosity with vague statements about it being fine. But his daughter was persistent, and she deserved better than evasions. "The lady I was supposed to meet didn't show up," he said carefully. "But I met someone else, someone kind. Are you going to see her again?" "I don't know, Soph. Maybe if she wants to." Sophie was quiet for a moment, her small hand warm in his. Then she said with the blunt honesty of children, "I think you should call her. You've been happier the last few days. Different happy. Like when you're not just pretending for me." The observation hit harder than it should have. Marcus stopped walking, crouched down so he was eye level with his daughter on the cold sidewalk. "I'm not pretending with you, sweetheart. I'm always happy when I'm with you." "I know. But you're sad happy. Like you're happy because of me, but sad because of everything else." When Sophie's expression was solemn, too understanding, for someone who should still be learning basic math. "If this lady makes you regular happy, you should talk to her." Marcus pulled her into a hug, holding her tight against the October wind and the weight of her terrible, perfect understanding. When had she gotten so perceptive? When had she started carrying the burden of his unhappiness alongside her own childhood? "When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't always notice because you're busy being worried." She pulled back, studying his face. "So, will you call her?" "Yeah," Marcus heard himself say. "Yeah, I think I will." That night, after Sophie was asleep in the bedroom, they shared her small bed against one wall, his air mattress on the floor against the other. Marcus sat in their tiny kitchen with Victoria's card on the table in front of him and his phone in his hand. It was 8:30. Too late. Too early. Was there a proper time to call someone who'd bought you dinner and told you that you mattered? He'd composed and deleted 7 text messages already, each one sounding worse than the last. Too casual, too formal, too desperate, too indifferent. Nothing felt right because nothing could adequately express what he wanted to say. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for that moment of grace. I don't know what this is or what it could be, but I want to find out." Finally, before he could overthink it anymore, Marcus dialed the number. The phone rang once, twice. On the 3rd ring he almost hung up, convinced this was a mistake, that he was about to make a fool of himself exactly as he'd feared. Then, "Hello," Victoria's voice, clear and warm, instantly recognizable. Marcus's prepared speech evaporated. "Hi, it's Marcus, Hayes, from Friday night, at Bella Vista. I don't know if you remember." "Marcus." The warmth in her voice intensified. "Of course I remember. I'm glad you called." "You are." The words came out before he could stop them. Too raw, too honest. "I am. I was hoping you would." A pause, and he could hear background noise. Voices, movement, the ambient sound of public space. "I'm just finishing up at the office, but I have a few minutes. How are you?" How was he terrified, hopeful, confused about what he was doing and why he thought this was a good idea? "I'm okay. Good. Better than Friday anyway. Victoria's laugh was soft. That's not a high bar. No. No, it's not. Marcus found himself smiling despite his nerves. I wanted to thank you again. For everything. The meal, the conversation, all of it. You didn't have to do any of that. I know I didn't have to. I wanted to. Her voice gentled. Marcus, you don't need to keep thanking me. I meant what I said Friday night, about all of it. I've been carrying your card around for 3 days, trying to work up the courage to call. 3 days, I'm flattered it only took that long. I half expected never to hear from you again. Something in her tone suggested vulnerability. Like she'd been uncertain, too. Like maybe this mattered to her in ways he hadn't let himself believe. Can I be honest with you about something? Victoria asked. Please. I don't do this. Approach strangers in restaurants, pay for their meals, give out my personal number. In fact, I've never done it before Friday. The background noise shifted, became quieter. She was moving, perhaps leaving her office. My entire life is scheduled, controlled, carefully managed to maximize efficiency and minimize unpredictability. And then I saw you sitting there and something just shifted. I couldn't not help. She paused. And when we talked, when you opened up about your life and your daughter, I realized how lonely I've been in my perfectly controlled existence. Marcus absorbed this, trying to reconcile the confident woman from Friday night with this admission of isolation. You seem so put together, like you have everything figured out. That's what 30 years of practice looks like. I've gotten very good at appearing like I have my life in perfect order, but appearing and being are two different things. Another pause. I run a company with 200 employees. I make decisions that affect people's livelihoods every day. I have a corner office and a car that costs more than most people make in a year. And I eat dinner alone more nights than I can count, because I've prioritized success over everything else, including basic human connection. Why are you telling me this? Marcus asked quietly. Because I don't want you to think I'm some savior who swooped in to rescue you. I'm just another person trying to figure out how to be less alone. You were honest with me Friday night. Brutally honest in a way most people never are. I want to return that honesty. Something in Marcus's chest loosened. A tension he hadn't known he was carrying. They were both broken, just in different ways. Both lonely, just with different resources to mask it. The realization was strangely comforting. I'd like to see you again, he said, the words coming easier than he'd expected. If you want to, I don't know what that looks like or what you'd want from someone like me, but... Stop doing that, Victoria interrupted gently. Stop diminishing yourself. You're a father raising a child alone while working multiple jobs. You're someone who shows up even when it's hard, even when you're exhausted, even when people are cruel to you. That's not someone like you. That's someone remarkable. I don't feel remarkable. I feel like I'm barely holding it together most days. Most remarkable people do. The ones who think they're remarkable are usually insufferable. He could hear the smile in her voice. So, yes, I'd like to see you again. What does your schedule look like? Marcus almost laughed. His schedule was a patchwork of construction shifts, warehouse work, and the hours he could beg Jessica to watch Sophie. Complicated. I work construction during the day, and sometimes I pick up evening shifts at a warehouse. And I have Sophie most of the time. What about coffee Saturday morning if you're free? There's a place near Powell's City of Books that opens early. Victoria paused. You could bring Sophie if you need to. The offer was so casual, so matter-of-fact, as if having a 6-year-old along on a coffee date was completely normal. Most women he'd encountered over the years, admittedly few had treated Sophie like an inconvenience at best, a deal-breaker at worst. Are you sure she's... She asks a lot of questions about everything. She doesn't really have a filter. I like smart children who ask questions. They're more interesting than most adults I talk to. Victoria paused again. Marcus, I'm not asking you to compartmentalize your life. Your daughter is part of who you are. I'd like to meet her if you're comfortable with that. Comfortable. Was he comfortable introducing Sophie to someone he'd known for less than a week? Someone who might disappear as quickly as she'd appeared, leaving both of them to deal with the fallout. But the alternative was saying no, was pushing away this connection before it had a chance to become anything real. And Sophie had been right. He'd been sad-happy for so long he'd forgotten what the regular kind felt like. Maybe it was worth the risk. Saturday morning, he agreed. 10 o'clock. Perfect. Text me when you're on your way. Her voice warmed. I'm looking forward to it, Marcus. To seeing you again. To meeting the daughter who clearly means everything to you. After they hung up, Marcus sat in his quiet kitchen for a long time, staring at his phone like it held answers to questions he was afraid to ask. What was he doing? What was he hoping for? What happened when someone like Victoria, successful, sophisticated, clearly out of his league, realized that his life was an endless cycle of barely making rent and choosing between necessities? But beneath the fear was something else. Anticipation. The fragile, tentative hope that maybe this wouldn't end in disappointment. That maybe for once something good could happen without immediately falling apart. Saturday morning arrived, cold and bright, the kind of October day that promised rain later but was holding it back for now. Marcus woke early, his stomach churning with nerves, and found Sophie, already awake, sitting on her bed with her solar system project spread out around her. Is today the day we meet your friend? She asked, without looking up from the careful arrangement of painted styrofoam balls. Her name is Victoria, and yes, if you still want to come. Of course I want to come. I need to make sure she's nice to you. Sophie glanced up, her expression serious. Aunt Jess says some people aren't nice even when they pretend to be. I'm good at telling the difference. Marcus's heart squeezed. When had his 6-year-old daughter decided she needed to protect him? When had their roles reversed enough that she felt responsible for vetting his friendships? I appreciate that, sweetheart, but this is just coffee, just talking. You don't need to worry. I'm not worried. I'm careful. There's a difference. She went back to her planets, her small hands precise as she positioned Earth just right. What should I wear? They settled on her favorite purple jacket and jeans, which Sophie paired with rain boots because she liked the way they splashed in puddles. Marcus wore his cleanest pair of jeans and a flannel shirt that was only slightly frayed at the cuffs, and tried not to think about how Victoria had probably spent more on her blazer than he spent on groceries in a month. Powell's City of Books occupied an entire city block in the Pearl District, a labyrinth of new and used books spread across multiple floors and color-coded rooms. The cafe was tucked into the corner of the main floor, all exposed brick and mismatched furniture, and the smell of coffee mixing with old paper. Marcus spotted Victoria immediately. She was sitting at a corner table reading something on her tablet, a cup of coffee already in front of her. She looked different than she had at the restaurant. More casual in dark jeans and a soft gray sweater that made her look approachable instead of corporate. When she glanced up and saw them, her face lit up with a genuine smile that made Marcus's nervous stomach settle slightly. Marcus. She stood as they approached, and Marcus noticed she didn't tower over him in sneakers the way she might have in heels. And this must be Sophie. Sophie studied Victoria with the serious intensity she brought to everything, taking in details Marcus probably wouldn't notice. After a moment that felt like an eternity, she nodded. Hi. Daddy says you were nice to him when someone was mean. Thank you for that. Victoria's expression softened. You're welcome. Your dad deserved kindness that night. He deserves it every night, actually. I know. I tell him that, but he doesn't always listen. Sophie pulled out a chair and climbed onto it with the confidence of a child who'd been taught that she belonged in the world. Do you like space? I do. Are you interested in astronomy? I'm doing a project on the solar system. Did you know that if the sun was as tall as a regular door, Earth would be the size of a nickel, and just like that, they were off. Marcus ordered coffee for himself and hot chocolate for Sophie, then sat back and watched his daughter interrogate Victoria with questions about planets, stars, and whether she thought there was life on other worlds. To Victoria's credit, she didn't talk down to Sophie or dismiss her curiosity. She engaged, fully asking follow-up questions, admitting when she didn't know something, treating Sophie's interests with the same seriousness she probably brought to board meetings. "Your daughter is brilliant," Victoria said when Sophie excused herself to use the bathroom, her voice warm with genuine admiration. "She has your eyes and your honesty. She's the best thing I've ever done. The only thing I know for certain I got right." Marcus wrapped his hands around his coffee cup, grateful for the warmth. "Thank you for being patient with her questions. Most people get overwhelmed pretty quickly. Most people are boring." Victoria leaned forward slightly. "She's perceptive, too. The way she looked at me when you first arrived, she was evaluating whether I'm safe for you to be around. She's protective of you. She shouldn't have to be. She's 6. She should be worried about 6-year-old things, not whether her dad is okay. But she is worried because she loves you. That's not a burden you put on her, Marcus. That's just what happens when people love each other. They worry. They want the best for each other." Victoria paused, choosing her words carefully. "Has it been just the two of you since her mother left?" "Mostly. My sister Jessica helps when she can, but yeah. It's primarily been me and Sophie figuring things out as we go. That must be exhausting." "It's terrifying," Marcus admitted. "Every decision feels massive because I'm the only one making it. What school, what doctor, how to talk to her about her mother, when to push her, and when to let her rest. I'm making it up as I go and hoping I'm not screwing her up too badly." "You're not screwing her up. She's confident, curious kind. Those things don't happen by accident. They happen because someone is doing the hard work of parenting well." Before Marcus could respond, Sophie returned, climbing back into her chair with a folded piece of paper in her hand. "I drew this for you," she announced, sliding the paper across the table to Victoria. "It's Saturn. It's my favorite planet because the rings are beautiful and it's made of gas, but it still exists. I think that's cool." Victoria unfolded the drawing carefully, studying the crayon rendition of Saturn with its rainbow-colored rings. "This is wonderful, Sophie, thank you. I'm going to put this on my desk at work." "Really?" Sophie's eyes widened. "At your important job, especially at my important job. Sometimes, when I'm having difficult meetings, I'll look at it and remember that there are more interesting things in the universe than quarterly reports." Victoria caught Marcus's eye, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or recognition of something neither of them had names for yet. They stayed for another hour, the conversation flowing easier than it had any right to. Victoria told them about Cloud9 Solutions, explaining what her company did in terms simple enough for Sophie to follow. She asked about Sophie's school, her favorite subjects, what she wanted to be when she grew up. "I want to be an astronaut," Sophie declared. "Or a paleontologist, or maybe both. Can you be both?" "I don't see why not. The best way to be good at anything is to be curious about everything." Victoria glanced at her watch, then seemed to make a decision. "I have something I'd like to run by both of you if you have a few more minutes." Marcus nodded, curious. "My company is starting a new initiative focused on work-life balance and supporting employees with families. Part of that is understanding what real families actually need, not what executives think they need." She looked directly at Sophie. "I was wondering if you and your dad would be willing to come tour Cloud9 Solutions sometime." I'd love your perspective on what would make a workplace more family-friendly. And Sophie, I'd particularly like to hear your thoughts on what would help kids feel welcome in spaces where their parents work." Sophie's face lit up. "Like a field trip. Exactly like a field trip. We could order lunch. You could explore the office, meet some of the people who work there. And if you have ideas about how we could make things better for employees with children, I'd genuinely like to hear them." Marcus's throat tightened. She was asking for Sophie's input, treating his 6-year-old daughter like her opinions mattered, like her perspective had value. Most people barely acknowledged Sophie existed beyond polite hellos. Victoria was inviting her into her professional space, suggesting that a child's view might actually improve how a company operated. "We'd love to," Marcus managed, "if you're sure." "I'm completely sure. How about next Saturday, say 11 o'clock? That gives you time to sleep in a bit." Victoria smiled at Sophie. "What do you think? Want to help me make my company better?" "Yes." Sophie bounced in her seat. "Can I bring my solar system project? I have to finish it by next Friday, and maybe your employees would like to see it." "I think they'd love to see it. We have a presentation room you could use." As they left Powell's, Sophie slipped her hand into Marcus's on one side, and after a moment's hesitation reached for Victoria's hand on the other. It was such a simple gesture, such a natural expression of trust, but it made Marcus's eyes sting with emotions he couldn't name. Victoria squeezed Sophie's hand gently, and when she met Marcus's gaze over his daughter's head, he saw his own wonder reflected back at him. This was happening. Whatever this was, it was becoming real. Not just a moment of grace in a restaurant, but something with continuity, with future implications, with the possibility of changing the shape of their lives. "I like her," Sophie announced as they rode the bus home later. "She listens, really listens. Not pretend listens like some grown-ups do." "I like her too," Marcus admitted. "Are you going to be boyfriend-girlfriend?" The question, delivered with childlike directness, made Marcus choke on air. "I don't. We just met, sweetheart. It's too early for that kind of talk. But you like her in the special way. I can tell." Sophie swung her legs, her rain boots thumping against the bus seat. "It's okay if you do, Daddy. You're allowed to like someone who's nice to you." The wisdom of 6-year-olds. Marcus pulled her close, kissed the top of her head. "When did you get so smart about feelings?" "I've always been smart about feelings. You just don't usually ask me about them." She snuggled against his side. "I think maybe we could be happy. The three of us. Not right away, but maybe eventually. If she wants to be part of our family." The hope in her voice was almost unbearable. Marcus wanted to protect her from disappointment, wanted to caution her not to get attached too quickly, wanted to remind her that good things in their lives had a tendency to disappear. But he also wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe this time would be different. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "Thank you for today. Meeting Sophie was a joy. She's absolutely brilliant and she clearly adores you. See you next Saturday. And Marcus, you're doing an incredible job. I hope you know that." He stared at the message for a long time before responding. "Thank you for seeing us. Both of us. Looking forward to Saturday." Her reply came quickly. "I see you, Marcus. Both of you. That's not going to change." And lying on his air mattress on the floor of his daughter's bedroom in their tiny apartment with thin walls and a heater that barely worked, Marcus Hayes let himself believe it might be true. The week between coffee and the office visit passed in a strange suspension of time, each day feeling simultaneously endless and too short. Marcus found himself checking his phone more often than he should, reading and rereading Victoria's messages like they contained hidden meanings he might have missed the first dozen times. Their texts were frequent but never intrusive. She'd sent him articles about parenting or space exploration with notes like, "Thought Sophie might find this interesting," Or, reminded me of your conversation about teaching her to advocate for herself. He'd respond with updates about Sophie's solar system project, or observations about his day that felt safe to share small windows into their separate lives that somehow made the distance between coffee dates feel less vast. On Wednesday, Marcus's phone rang during his lunch break. Victoria's name on the screen sent his pulse racing in a way that felt both exciting and terrifying. "Hey," he answered, stepping away from the construction site noise. "Everything okay?" "Everything's fine. I was just thinking about Saturday and wanted to make sure you knew there's no pressure around the office visit." Her voice carried the background hum of traffic. "If it feels like too much, or if you'd rather just grab lunch somewhere instead, that's completely fine." "Are you having second thoughts?" The question came out more vulnerable than Marcus intended. "No, not at all. I'm worried you might be." A pause, and he could hear her choosing words carefully. "Marcus, I know my world probably looks very different from yours. Big office, corporate environment people in expensive suits talking about things that might not matter to you. I don't want you to feel uncomfortable or like you need to perform some version of yourself that isn't real." The observation was so accurate it stole his breath. He had been worried about exactly that. Walking into her territory surrounded by her success, feeling like an imposter in his Goodwill clothes. "I'm scared I'll embarrass you," he admitted. "Me and Sophie, we don't fit into that world." "You're not supposed to fit into my world, Marcus. That's the whole point." Victoria's voice gentled. "I spend all my time with people who fit perfectly, who say the right things, wear the right clothes, perform success like it's a script they've memorized, and I'm exhausted by it. You and Sophie are real, you're honest. That's not something to be embarrassed about. Your employees are going to wonder why you're bringing random people into the office. They're going to wonder why their CEO is finally taking an interest in what actually matters instead of just quarterly earnings." He could hear the smile in her voice. "Besides, I'm not bringing random people. I'm bringing a consultant and his brilliant daughter to help us understand how to better support working parents. That's a legitimate business purpose." "A consultant?" Marcus almost laughed. "Vic, I work construction. I'm not qualified to consult on anything except maybe how to frame a wall." "You're raising a child alone while working multiple jobs in a society that's structured to make that nearly impossible. You're navigating systems that weren't designed with people like you in mind. You're an expert in exactly what we need to understand." Her tone shifted, became more serious. "Can I tell you what I really want from Saturday, please? I want you to see my life, not the polished version I show investors or the carefully managed image I present to the board. I want you to see what my days actually look like, what I've built, what matters to me professionally." She paused. "Because if we're going to keep doing this, whatever this is, you should know what you're getting into. And I should know if the person I'm becoming when I'm with you can exist in the same space as the person I've had to be to succeed." The honesty in her admission made something in Marcus's chest unclench. She was scared too. Maybe not of the same things, but scared nonetheless. Worried about the same fundamental question that had been keeping him awake at night. Could two people from such different worlds actually build something that lasted? "Okay," he said. "We'll come, and I promise to give you my honest opinion about everything, even if it's not what you want to hear. Especially if it's not what I want to hear. That's when I need honesty most." Saturday arrived with the kind of clarity that made Portland beautiful despite the cold. Marcus and Sophie took the bus into the Pearl District, Sophie clutching her completed solar system project in a cardboard box like it contained something precious. She'd finished it the night before, staying up past her bedtime to make sure every planet was positioned correctly, every fact card perfectly written in her careful 6-year-old handwriting. Cloud9 Solutions occupied 3 floors of a modern building near the waterfront. All glass and steel, and the kind of architectural confidence that came with the success. Marcus's stomach churned as they walked through the lobby, feeling acutely aware of every way they didn't belong. Sophie's worn sneakers squeaking on marble floors. His jacket that was warm but definitely not stylish. The security guards barely concealed surprise when Marcus gave their names and explained they were expected, made his face burn. But then the elevator doors opened on the 15th floor, and Victoria was there waiting for them wearing a smile that made the nerves settle slightly. You made it. She was dressed more casually than he'd expected. Dark slacks and a simple blouse instead of a power suit, making herself less intimidating. Meeting them halfway, maybe. "Mia, is that your project?" "Yes. Do you want to see it?" Sophie was already opening the box, eager to share her work. "Absolutely. But first, let me show you around. Then we'll find the perfect place for your presentation." The office was open concept, all collaborative spaces, and natural light and people who looked both busy and somehow relaxed. Victoria introduced them to employees as they passed, and Marcus braced for judgment or curiosity, but mostly people just smiled and welcomed them with the kind of casual friendliness that suggested Victoria had prepared them somehow. "This is our main development area." Victoria gestured to a large room filled with computers and whiteboards covered in diagrams Marcus couldn't begin to decipher. "We create software solutions for healthcare providers, making patient data more accessible while maintaining privacy protections." "So you help doctors take care of people better?" Sophie asked. "Exactly. When doctors can see all of someone's medical history quickly and easily, they can make better decisions about treatment." Victoria crouched down to Sophie's level. "Does that make sense?" "Yeah. Like when I fell off the swings and we went to the hospital and Daddy had to tell them about my allergies because they didn't already know. If they had your software, they'd already know." "Right. That's exactly the kind of problem we're trying to solve." They continued the tour, Victoria explaining things in terms both Marcus and Sophie could understand. Never talking down, but also never assuming knowledge they didn't have. She showed them the employee break room, the meditation spaces, the small childcare facility that served employees' children during school breaks. "This is what I wanted your input on." Victoria gestured to the daycare area. It was nice enough, bright, clean, filled with age-appropriate toys. But something about it felt sterile. More like a doctor's office than a place where kids would actually want to spend time. "We added this 2 years ago, but the usage is lower than we expected. I'm trying to figure out why parents aren't using it." Marcus looked around, seeing it through the eyes of a parent who'd spent 6 years figuring out childcare. The space was well-intentioned, but missing something essential. "Can I be honest?" "Please. That's why you're here. It looks like childcare designed by people who don't use childcare. Everything's too perfect, too controlled. It feels like a place where kids should be quiet and well-behaved instead of a place where they can actually be kids. What would you change?" Victoria pulled out her phone, ready to take notes. "The furniture is all new and matching. That's intimidating for kids who are used to mismatched stuff at home. The toys are educational, but not fun. And there's no space for mess. No art station where kids can actually create things without worrying about keeping everything pristine." Marcus paused, then added, "Also, it's too far from the main work areas. Parents want to be close enough to their kids to check in easily. Being 3 hallways away means they're always anxious about whether their kid is okay." Sophie tugged on Victoria's sleeve. "And there's no books about space. How are kids supposed to learn about the universe if there's no space books?" Victoria laughed, making notes on her phone. "You're absolutely right, both of you. This is exactly what I needed to hear." She looked at Marcus with something like admiration. "You see things I miss. Things my expensive consultants miss because they've never actually had to scramble to find someone to watch their kid while they work a double shift. Your expensive consultants probably have nannies, Marcus said without thinking, then immediately wished he could take it back. Sorry, that was true, and exactly the kind of honest observation I asked for. Victoria met his eyes. Don't apologize for seeing clearly, Marcus. It's one of the things I value most about you. They spent another hour touring the facility with Marcus and Sophie, offering observations about everything from the break room layout to the way meeting rooms were scheduled. Victoria listened to all of it, taking notes, asking follow-up questions, treating their perspectives with the same seriousness she probably gave board presentations. Finally, they reached a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. Victoria had set up a presentation screen and arranged chairs in a small semicircle. I thought this might be a good place for Sophie to share her solar system project if you're still willing. Sophie's eyes went wide. Really? The big screen? Really? I invited a few people who I thought might be interested. Is that okay? Before Sophie could answer, the door opened and a handful of employees filed in. Young and old, all with expressions of genuine curiosity rather than obligation. One woman had a daughter around Sophie's age with her, and the girl immediately gravitated towards Sophie with the easy friendship of children. Hi, I'm Emma. Is that your planet project? Yeah. Want to help me present it? And just like that, Sophie's nervousness evaporated. Marcus watched his daughter arrange her planets with Emma's help, the two girls chattering about Saturn's rings and Jupiter's storms like they'd known each other for years instead of minutes. The presentation was everything Marcus could have hoped for and more. Sophie explained each planet with enthusiasm and surprising depth, referencing facts she'd learned and observations she'd made. Emma chimed in occasionally, and the adults asked questions that were genuine rather than patronizing. Victoria sat next to Marcus, and at some point during the presentation her hand found his. Their fingers intertwined in a way that felt both natural and significant. When Sophie finished, the room burst into applause. She beamed, taking an elaborate bow that made everyone laugh. Emma's mother approached Marcus afterward. Your daughter is wonderful. Emma would love to have a play date sometime if you're interested. She doesn't meet a lot of other kids who are as passionate about science. Marcus found himself exchanging contact information, making plans, participating in the kind of normal parent interaction he rarely got to experience. And all the while, Victoria watched with an expression he couldn't quite read, but that made his heart beat faster. After the presentation wound down and the conference room emptied, it was just the three of them again. Sophie was showing Emma's mother's business card to Victoria with excitement. I made a friend, a real friend, who likes space. You did, and you gave an excellent presentation, very professional. Victoria smiled at her, then glanced at Marcus. There's one more thing I wanted to show you both if you have time. She led them to a corner office with a view that probably cost more than Marcus made in a year. The desk was massive, the shelves lined with awards and photos. But what caught Marcus's attention was the drawing on the wall behind her desk, carefully framed. Saturn with rainbow rings, the picture Sophie had given her at the coffee shop. You actually hung it up, he said, his voice rough with emotion he didn't know how to name. I told Sophie I would. I don't break promises to children. Victoria gestured to the office. This is where I spend most of my time when I'm not in meetings. It's very professional, very serious. But that drawing reminds me that there are more important things than quarterly earnings, that curiosity and wonder matter, that the way we see the world when we're young is worth preserving. Sophie walked over to the frame, touching it gently. It looks different in a frame. More important. It is important. You're important, Sophie. And your perspective matters, not just to me, but to this whole company. The observations you and your dad made today are going to change how we think about supporting families. That's significant." Marcus felt his throat tighten. This woman, this successful CEO with her corner office, and her awards and her life that should have nothing to do with theirs, was making his daughter feel valued, was treating both of them like they mattered beyond the immediate moment, like their presence in her world was more than charity or curiosity. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said quietly, while Sophie explored the office, examining the view from different angles. "Of course. Why are you doing this? Really doing this? It can't just be about work-life balance policies." Victoria was quiet for a moment, watching Sophie. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "I told you I've been lonely, that's true, but it's more than that. I've spent my entire adult life building this company, proving I belonged in rooms where people didn't think women should be. And I succeeded. I have everything I thought I wanted." She turned to face him fully. "But somewhere along the way I forgot how to be a person instead of a CEO. I forgot that success without connection is just hollow. You and Sophie reminded me what it feels like to be seen as a person instead of a position. To have conversations that aren't about leveraging advantages or maximizing efficiency. To care about something beyond the next milestone." She paused. "I'm doing this because being around you makes me want to be better. Not more successful, just better." The vulnerability in her admission took Marcus's breath away. Here was this powerful woman admitting that she needed them as much as they were beginning to need her. That this wasn't rescue or charity, but mutual recognition of something they'd all been missing. Before he could respond, Sophie returned to them, her expression serious. "Victoria, can I ask you something important?" "Of course." "Are you going to keep being friends with me and Daddy? Because it would be really sad if you stopped. We like you a lot." Victoria crouched down, eye level with Sophie. "I like you both a lot, too. And yes, I'm going to keep being your friend for as long as you want me to be." "Good, because Daddy's been different since he met you. Happy different. And I think you've been different, too, in a good way." Sophie glanced between them with the knowing look of children who see more than adults realize. You fit together like puzzle pieces that didn't know they were missing their match. Marcus wanted to tell his daughter not to get ahead of herself, not to assume things that might not come true, but the words wouldn't come, because she wasn't wrong. Whatever this was between him and Victoria, it felt inevitable in a way nothing in his life had felt for years. They had lunch in Victoria's office, sandwiches she'd had delivered. Nothing fancy, just food shared in comfortable space. Sophie sat in Victoria's desk chair, spinning slowly while she ate, asking questions about what it was like to be in charge of so many people. "It's a lot of responsibility," Victoria admitted. "Every decision I make affects not just the company, but all the people who work here and their families. That's 200 employees plus their partners and children. Sometimes the weight of that is overwhelming." "Like how Daddy says every choice he makes about me is huge because he's the only one choosing," Sophie asked. "Exactly like that. The stakes feel impossibly high because we care so much about getting it right. But you're not the only one choosing anymore," Sophie pointed out. "You have Daddy and me now. We can help you choose just like you're helping us." The simple wisdom of it made Marcus's eyes sting. His daughter, his brilliant, perceptive daughter, was already weaving Victoria into their lives like she'd always been there. Already assuming a future where they helped each other navigate challenges instead of struggling alone. Later, as they prepared to leave, Victoria walked them to the elevator. At the last moment before the doors closed, she caught Marcus's hand. "Can I take you both to dinner? Not tonight, but soon, somewhere nice. I want to do this properly." "Do what properly?" Marcus asked, though he thought he knew. "Whatever this is becoming. You, me, Sophie. I want to acknowledge that it's real, that it matters, that I'm choosing to make space for it in my life." She squeezed his hand. "Is that okay?" Marcus looked down at Sophie, who was nodding enthusiastically. "Yeah," he managed. "Yeah, that's more than okay." The following Friday, Victoria texted him an address and a time. When Marcus looked up the restaurant, his stomach dropped. Higgins was the kind of place that required reservations weeks in advance. The kind where dinner for 3 would cost more than he made in a week. He called her immediately. "Victoria, I can't afford this. I appreciate the gesture, but you're not paying." She interrupted gently. "I'm taking you both out. Please, let me do this, Marcus. Let me show you that you're worth celebrating. I don't have anything appropriate to wear to a place like that. Do you have a clean shirt? Yes. Then you have something appropriate. Marcus, they care about reservations and behavior, not brand names. You'll be fine. Sophie will be fine, I promise." He almost argued further, but stopped himself. This mattered to her, and he was beginning to understand that letting her do things for them wasn't about charity. It was about allowing her to express care in the ways she knew how, the same way he'd let her pay for his meal that first night. "Okay, thank you for all of this. You're welcome. And Marcus, I'm looking forward to it, to being seen in public with you both, to claiming this, whatever it is, instead of hiding it." Friday night found them back in the Pearl District, this time at a restaurant that made Bella Vista look casual by comparison. Crystal, chandeliers, white tablecloths, servers who moved with choreographed precision. Marcus's nerves were screaming at him to run, but Sophie's hand in his kept him grounded. Victoria was already there, stunning in a simple black dress that probably cost more than his rent. But when she saw them, her face lit up with such genuine warmth that the expensive clothes didn't matter. "You look beautiful," Marcus said, the words escaping before he could second-guess them. "So do you, both of you." She hugged Sophie, then, after a moment's hesitation, kissed Marcus's cheek in greeting. The simple gesture felt monumental, an acknowledgement of intimacy in public space. Dinner was magnificent in ways Marcus had never experienced. Courses arrived like small works of art, each one explained by servers who seemed to genuinely care about the food they were serving. Sophie was fascinated by everything, asking questions about how dishes were prepared, what ingredients were used, whether the chef liked making beautiful food. "I think this might be the best thing I've ever eaten," Marcus admitted during the main course. A piece of fish so perfectly cooked it nearly dissolved on his tongue. "Better than Bella Vista?" Victoria asked with a small smile. "Different. Bella Vista will always be special because of what it meant." He gestured at the table at Sophie's delighted expression as she tried something new. "But this is special too, all of it." Halfway through dessert, Victoria reached across the table and took his hand. Not hiding it, not making it subtle. A clear statement to anyone watching that this mattered, that he mattered. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice steady but carrying weight. "And I need you to really hear it okay." Marcus nodded, his heart racing. "I know we haven't known each other long. I know your life is complicated and mine is demanding, and there are 1,000 logical reasons why this shouldn't work." She paused, her eyes searching his. "But I'm choosing it anyway. Choosing you. Choosing Sophie. Choosing to make room in my carefully controlled life for something messy and uncertain and real." She took a breath. "I'm falling for you, Marcus. Both of you. And I need to know if that's something you want. If I'm someone you want. Because if not, I need to know now before this gets any deeper." The restaurant noise faded to nothing. Sophie had stopped eating, watching them both with wide eyes. Marcus's throat was tight with emotions too big for words, but he forced them out anyway. "I'm terrified," he admitted. "I'm terrified of needing you and having you realize I'm not worth the effort." I'm terrified of Sophie getting attached and you disappearing. I'm terrified that I have nothing to offer you except problems and complications and a life that doesn't look anything like yours." He took a shaky breath. "But I'm more terrified of saying no, of pushing away the first real thing I've felt in 6 years because I'm too scared to believe I deserve it. So, yes, I want this. Whatever this is, however it looks, I want it." Victoria's smile was radiant. "Then we'll figure it out together, all three of us." Sophie, who'd been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. "Does this mean you're Daddy's girlfriend now?" Victoria laughed, the sound bright and unguarded. "Would that be okay with you? Yes. But you should know that being part of our family means you have to help with my homework sometimes and watch space documentaries even when they're boring and eat peanut butter sandwiches when we can't afford anything else." "I think I can handle that," Victoria said seriously. "And you should know that being part of my life means sometimes having to attend boring business dinners and dealing with me when I'm stressed about work and understanding that I'm learning how to do this as I go." "We're all learning," Marcus said softly. "That's what makes it real." They finished dessert in comfortable silence, the kind that didn't need filling. When they left the restaurant, Victoria's hand found Marcus's naturally, and Sophie walked between them holding both their hands, already building bridges between their separate lives. On the sidewalk outside, while they waited for Victoria's car, Sophie looked up at both of them with that serious expression she got when processing something important. "I think we're going to be okay," she announced. "The three of us. Different than we were, but better different." And standing there in the October cold, holding hands with a woman who'd chosen to see him and a daughter who taught him that hope was worth the risk, Marcus Hayes finally believed it might be true. The weeks that followed transformed into months, and the rhythm of their lives shifted to accommodate each other in ways that felt both deliberate and inevitable. Victoria started keeping spare clothes at Marcus's apartment. Practical things like jeans and sweaters that could survive a 6-year-old's sticky fingers. Marcus found himself with a key to Victoria's place, a waterfront condo that initially intimidated him but gradually became a space where he could breathe differently, where the weight of constant financial pressure lifted just enough to remind him what ease felt like. But it wasn't seamless. Real things never were. The first real argument came in December, 3 months after that dinner, where they'd made their relationship official. Marcus had picked up extra shifts, both at the construction site and cleaning offices at night, trying to save money for Sophie's birthday in March. He'd been exhausted, running on 4 hours of sleep a night, and he'd snapped at Victoria when she'd suggested paying for Sophie's party. "I can handle my daughter's birthday," he'd said, his voice sharper than he'd intended. They were in his apartment, Sophie asleep in the bedroom, and Victoria's face had gone very still. "I know you can handle it. I was just offering to help. That's what you always do, isn't it? Every time there's a problem, you throw money at it." The words came out bitter, fueled by exhaustion and something deeper. "Sophie needs new shoes. You buy them, the heat goes out, you call your building guy. I'm starting to feel like a project you're managing instead of a partner you're respecting." Victoria stood slowly from the couch, her expression carefully controlled. "And I'm starting to feel like you'd rather exhaust yourself than accept help from someone who cares about you. This isn't about control, Marcus. It's about having resources and wanting to share them with people I love." The word hung between them. Love. The first time either of them had said it directly, but Marcus was too tired, too defensive to acknowledge it properly. "Partnership means I get to contribute equally. What do I bring to this relationship besides problems? You bring yourself." Victoria's composure cracked slightly. "You bring Sophie." You bring honesty and perspective and the reminder that there's more to life than quarterly earnings. You bring the first real connection I've had in years, but apparently that's not enough for you to believe you deserve to be here. The accusation landed hard because it was true. Marcus did feel like he needed to earn his place in her life. Did feel like being with him was a net negative in her world. Did wake up some mornings wondering when she'd realize she could do better. "I'm sorry," he said finally, the fight draining out of him. "You're right, I'm making this about my insecurity instead of about us building something together." Victoria moved closer, her hand finding his. "I don't need you to match my salary, Marcus. I need you to let me share what I have without treating it like an insult. When Sophie needed shoes, buying them wasn't about proving you couldn't provide. It was about loving a little girl and wanting her feet not to hurt. When your heat went out, fixing it wasn't about showing off my resources. It was about not wanting you both to freeze in December. Can you understand that?" He could, or he was trying to. The months with Victoria were teaching him uncomfortable truths about his own pride, about how the years of struggle had made him rigid about accepting help, about how his determination to never be a burden had isolated him from the very support that might make life sustainable. "I'm still learning how to do this," he admitted, "how to let someone care without feeling like I'm taking advantage." "Then learn. I'll be patient while you do. But Evan, you have to actually try. You have to let me in even when it's uncomfortable." She paused, then added softly, "I love you. I need you to believe that's real, that it's not conditional on you being financially independent or perfectly self-sufficient. I love you because of who you are, including the parts that are struggling. I love you too." The words felt massive, terrifying, liberating. "I'm just scared of what happens when loving me becomes inconvenient. Then I guess we'll find out together. But I'm not going anywhere, Marcus. Not when things get hard. Not when you're exhausted and defensive. Not when your pride makes you push me away. I'm staying." They worked through it slowly, imperfectly. Marcus tried to accept help with more grace. Victoria tried to ask before solving problems, to give him space to struggle when struggle was what he needed. It wasn't easy, but it was honest. And honesty turned out to be the foundation they could build on. By February, their lives had woven together enough that untangling them would have required deliberate effort. Sophie spent weekends at Victoria's condo, her space-themed drawings gradually covering the previously minimalist walls. Victoria attended parent-teacher conferences and school events, sitting next to Marcus and taking notes about Sophie's progress like she'd always been there. Marcus started having dinner with Victoria's parents, awkward at first, their initial skepticism about their daughter dating a construction worker obvious, but gradually warming as they saw how Victoria had softened, how she smiled more, how she'd started leaving work at reasonable hours to have dinner with her chosen family. The transformation in Victoria's company was visible, too. The childcare center was completely redesigned based on Marcus and Sophie's observations, and usage tripled within 2 months. Victoria started a program for employees with non-traditional family structures, offering flexible schedules and support systems that acknowledged real life was complicated. She cited Marcus in board meetings, not by name, but his insights about what working parents actually needed shaped policy in ways that made the company stronger. "You're changing my world," she told him one night in late February. They were at her place, Sophie asleep in the guest room that had gradually become her room, complete with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. Not just personally, professionally too. The company's employee satisfaction scores are higher than they've ever been because we're finally focusing on things that matter. "I didn't do anything except point out the obvious," Marcus protested. "You saw what we were missing. That's everything." Victoria curled against him on the couch, her head on his shoulder. "I got a call today from a headhunter. Major tech company in San Francisco offering me a position that would double my salary and put me in charge of their entire healthcare division. Marcus's stomach dropped. San Francisco. 3,000 miles away. The end of this fragile thing they'd built. What did you say? His voice came out carefully neutral. I said no. Victoria lifted her head to look at him. I didn't even have to think about it. 5 years ago, I would have been on a plane the next day. The money, the prestige, the opportunity. It would have been everything I thought I wanted. But now I have everything I actually want, here, with you and Sophie. Victoria, you can't turn down opportunities like that for us. What if you regret it? I won't. And even if I did, that would be my choice to make. She took his hand. Marcus, you need to understand something. You and Sophie aren't holding me back. You're the reason I finally understand what success actually means. It's not corner offices or salary increases. It's having people you love to come home to. It's building a life that matters beyond quarterly reports. You've given me that. Why would I trade it for more money? The certainty in her voice made something in Marcus's chest unclench. Maybe she really meant it. Maybe this wasn't temporary. Maybe she'd chosen them as deliberately as they'd chosen her. But the universe had one more test for them. In early March, Marcus's construction company landed a major contract, a waterfront development project in Seattle. 18 months of work that would pay $85,000 a year, nearly double his current income. It was the kind of opportunity that could change his financial situation completely. Build real savings. Maybe even get him into a position where he didn't have to work multiple jobs just to survive. The catch was Seattle. 3 hours from Portland. 3 hours from Victoria. He sat at Victoria's dining table with the offer letter in front of him, doing the math in his head. 18 months in Seattle. 18 months away from everything they'd built. But the money could be transformative. Could give him the stability he'd been chasing for 6 years. You should take it, Victoria said when he showed her the offer. She'd gone very still, reading the details carefully. It's in Seattle. For 18 months. I know. But Evan, this is your future. Sophie's future. You can't turn this down because of me. You turned down San Francisco for us. That's different. I have options. You don't have the luxury of saying no to opportunities that could fundamentally change your situation. Victoria's voice was steady, but he could see the effort it took. I love you, which means I want what's best for you and Sophie, even if it's hard for me. What if what's best is staying here with you? Then you need to be absolutely sure. Really sure. Because I don't want you resenting me in 5 years when you're still struggling financially and wondering what might have been different. They spent 3 days talking through scenarios, working through possibilities, trying to find solutions that didn't require sacrifice from either of them. Jessica offered to keep Sophie in Portland so she wouldn't have to change schools. Victoria suggested she could visit on weekends, make the drive, maintain the connection. Marcus calculated budgets and timelines, trying to figure out if the 18 months apart was worth the financial stability it might provide. But every scenario felt wrong. Every solution required someone giving up something essential. On the 4th day, Sophie resolved it with the clarity that only children possess. I don't want to live without Victoria for 18 months, she announced over breakfast at Marcus's apartment. And I don't want Daddy to go away. We're a family now. Families stay together. It's not that simple, sweetheart, Marcus started. But Sophie cut him off, her expression exasperated in the way only a 6-year-old could manage. Why not? Victoria has money. Daddy needs money. We all love each other. Why can't Victoria just help until Daddy finds a good job here? She looked between them with frustration. You're both so worried about who's giving what that you forgot The point is being together. That's what families do. They help each other. Out of the mouths of babes. Marcus looked at Victoria, saw his own revelation reflected in her eyes. "She's right," Victoria said softly. "We've been so focused on equality and independence that we're missing the actual solution, which is that I have resources I don't need, and you need resources to build the stability you want. Why are we treating that like a problem instead of an opportunity? Because I don't want to be someone you support financially. I want to be a partner." "You are a partner. Money isn't the only currency of partnership, Marcus. You bring perspective to my company that's made it better. You make me a better person. You've given me a family. Those things have value that can't be measured in dollars." Victoria reached for his hand. "What if we stopped keeping score? What if we just pooled resources and built the life we want together?" It went against everything Marcus had told himself about not being a burden, about maintaining his independence, about proving his worth through financial contribution. But Sophie was right. He was so busy protecting his pride that he was sabotaging the family they'd built. "I could turn down Seattle," he said slowly. "Use the time I would have spent there to look for better work here. Maybe take some courses, get certified in something that pays more than construction, but that would mean less income short-term while I retrained. I can cover that gladly." Victoria's voice was firm. "We move in together properly. Split one rent instead of two. You go back to school or whatever training you need. When you're in a better position, you contribute more. And we stop treating it like some competition to prove who needs who less." She leaned forward. "I love you. I want to build a life with you. That means sometimes I carry more weight and sometimes you do. And we trust each other enough to let it balance over time instead of demanding perfect equality in every moment." Marcus felt tears burning behind his eyes. Accepting this meant admitting he couldn't do it all alone, meant acknowledging that pride was less important than family, meant trusting that Victoria wouldn't hold this over him or use it as leverage later. "Okay," he said. "Okay, let's do it. Let's actually build this together instead of trying to prove we don't need each other." Sophie cheered, launching herself at both of them in a tackle hug that knocked Marcus back in his chair and made Victoria laugh. It was such a simple gesture, such a natural expression of joy, but it felt like the beginning of something real, something that could last. "I'm calling the Seattle company today," Marcus said, turning down the offer. "And I'm calling my realtor," Victoria added. "We need a place that's ours, not mine, not yours, ours." They spent the following week looking at apartments. Victoria wanted something nice. Marcus wanted something affordable. They compromised on a 3-bedroom in Selwood with a small yard where Sophie could play and enough space for all of them to have privacy when they needed it. Not as luxurious as Victoria's condo, but warmer. More lived in. The kind of place that could actually feel like home. Marcus enrolled in a certification program for project management the same week, using his construction experience as foundation, but building toward work that paid better and didn't destroy his body. The program would take 6 months. 6 months of studying while Victoria covered their expenses. 6 months of swallowing his pride and accepting help and trusting that this wouldn't make him less of a partner. Victoria had adjusted her schedule to be home for family dinners most nights, something her employees noticed. The CEO, who used to work until 8 every evening, now left at 5:30, and somehow the company didn't collapse. If anything, morale improved. People started following her example, leaving at reasonable hours, prioritizing their own families, and discovering they could be more productive in less time. Jessica cried the first time she visited them in their new apartment. "You look happy," she said, hugging Marcus tight. "Really happy, not pretending happy." "I am. It's terrifying, but I am. You deserve it, Marcus. You always did. I'm glad you finally believe that. The certification program was harder than Marcus expected, pushing him in ways that physical labor never had. He struggled with some of the coursework, spent late nights studying while Victoria helped quiz him and Sophie brought him encouraging drawings. But for the first time in 6 years, he felt like he was building toward something instead of just surviving. In May, Victoria came home with news that made her eyes bright with excitement. I had an interesting conversation today with our head of operations. He's retiring next year and the board is starting succession planning. She set her bag down, pulled off her coat. They asked if I had recommendations for his replacement. Marcus was helping Sophie with homework at the kitchen table. And I recommended someone with non-traditional experience, someone who understands the practical side of how businesses operate, who has managed complex logistics under pressure, who knows how to lead teams through difficult situations. Victoria smiled. I recommended you, or rather, I recommended that we create a position for you once you finish your certification. Operations coordinator to start with a clear path to director level. Marcus stared at her. Victoria, I haven't even finished the program. I've never worked in corporate anything. I can't just walk into your company. Our company, and yes, you can, because you're qualified. Your military background, your years managing construction projects, your ability to see what others miss. All of that translates to operations work. And frankly, you understand how actual work happens better than most people with MBAs. She sat down across from him. I'm not handing you a job because we're together. I'm offering you an opportunity because you're genuinely good at what you do, and my company would benefit from having you. Sophie looked up from her homework. You should take it, Daddy. Then you can work with Victoria and help make the company better, like you already do, but official. From the mouths of babes again. Marcus took the position starting part-time in June while he finished his certification. The whispers about nepotism lasted about 2 weeks before his actual competence became obvious. He reorganized their supply chain logistics, saving the company $200,000 in the first quarter. He implemented new safety protocols based on his construction experience. He spoke to employees in language they actually understood instead of corporate jargon, and morale in operations improved measurably. By August, Marcus had a career instead of just jobs. He had a family instead of just survival. He had a future that felt possible instead of predetermined by circumstance. On a warm evening in late August, 8 months after their first real fight about accepting help, Victoria came home and found Marcus and Sophie in the yard. Sophie was showing him a caterpillar she'd found, explaining its life cycle with the enthusiasm she brought to all scientific discoveries. Victoria stood in the doorway watching them, her heart full in a way she'd never experienced. This was what she'd been missing, not success or money or accolades. This, the sound of a child's laughter. The sight of someone she loved being fully present with someone else they both loved. The knowledge that she'd chosen them, and it was the best decision she'd ever made. Marcus looked up and saw her standing there. Something passed between them. Understanding. Gratitude. Love so deep it didn't need words. Come here, he called. Sophie's found a future butterfly. Victoria kicked off her heels and walked barefoot across the grass to join them. Sophie immediately launched into an explanation of metamorphosis, and Victoria listened with the same attention she brought to board meetings, asking questions genuinely curious. Later that night, after Sophie was asleep, Marcus and Victoria sat on their back porch with glasses of wine. The city lights glowed in the distance. The August air was warm and soft. Do you ever think about that night? Marcus asked. How close we came to missing this all the time. I think about what would have happened if I'd looked away instead of noticing you. If I'd decided your pain wasn't my business. If I'd let the opportunity for connection pass because it was easier than getting involved. Victoria leaned against him. I think about how close I came to missing you. Missing Sophie. Missing this life we've built, and it terrifies me. Me too. I almost didn't show up that night, you know. Almost canceled the whole thing because I was so convinced it would be a disaster. It was a disaster, just not the kind you expected. No, it turned out to be the best disaster of my life. Marcus kissed her forehead, then her lips soft and certain. Thank you for seeing me when I felt invisible. For staying when I gave you reasons to leave. For choosing us when you had every option in the world. Thank you for letting me in. For trusting that I meant it. For being brave enough to build something new instead of protecting yourself from hurt. Victoria smiled. We're good together, Marcus. Different than either of us expected, but good. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one. Sophie's bedroom window glowed softly above them. Their home, their family, their life built from a moment of grace and sustained by the daily choice to keep showing up for each other. Marcus thought about the offer letter from Seattle still in a drawer somewhere. The path not taken. The financial stability he'd chosen to sacrifice for something more important, and he knew with absolute certainty that he'd made the right choice. Some things were worth more than money. Some risks were worth taking. Some families were worth building, even when it meant accepting help. Even when it meant swallowing pride. Even when it meant trusting that love could be enough. I want to marry you, Marcus said suddenly, the words surprising him as much as her. Victoria turned to look at him, her eyes wide. What? Not right now, not tomorrow, but someday. I want Sophie to have your last name if she wants it. I want us to be a family on paper the way we already are in every other way. I want... He stopped searching for words. I want to stop being scared that this will end. I want to choose you permanently. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I want that too, all of it, whenever you're ready. I'm ready now. I just thought you might need time to be sure. Marcus. She cupped his face in her hands. I've been sure since the night we met. I just didn't know if you'd ever believe you deserved this. I'm starting to, he said honestly. You and Sophie, you're teaching me, every day, that I'm worth more than what I can provide financially, that showing up is enough, that love doesn't keep score. Good, because I plan on spending the rest of my life proving it to you. They kissed under the stars in the yard of their shared home with their daughter sleeping peacefully upstairs. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Marcus Hayes felt like he'd finally come home. 2 years later, on an October evening, much like the one where this all began, Marcus Hayes stood outside Bella Vista with a small velvet box in his pocket and his heart hammering against his ribs. But this time Victoria was with him, and Sophie, and there was no fear, no shame, only anticipation for what came next. Are you nervous, Daddy? Sophie asked, squeezing his hand. She was 8 now, taller, and somehow even more perceptive than before. Terrified, he admitted. Don't be. She's going to say yes. I helped you pick the ring, remember? Victoria laughed, adjusting her coat against the October wind. Should I be worried that you two are keeping secrets? Good secrets, Sophie assured her, the best kind. They walked into the restaurant together, and the warmth hit Marcus immediately. That same smell of garlic and marinara, that same hum of conversation and laughter. But everything else was different. He wasn't the man who'd sat here alone and humiliated 2 years ago. He was someone who'd learned his own worth, someone who'd built a life worth living. Their server was the same woman who'd been kind to him that November night. Amelia. Her face lit up when she saw them. I remember you, she said, her voice warm with recognition. You sat alone, and you—" She turned to Victoria. "You paid for his meal." "Best money I ever spent," Victoria said, taking Marcus's hand. "What happened after that night?" Amelia asked. "I've wondered." Marcus gestured to the three of them. "This happened, all of this." Amelia's eyes went bright with tears. "That's the most beautiful thing I've heard all year. I'm so happy for all of you." They were seated at the same table by the window where Marcus had waited for someone who never came. But this time he was surrounded by people who'd chosen to be there, who'd chosen him, who'd built something real out of a moment of grace. Dinner was perfect. Sophie chattered about her third-grade science fair project about the telescope Victoria had given her for her 8th birthday, about her plans to visit the Space Needle when they took their trip to Seattle next month. Just a visit now. Not a relocation. Not a sacrifice. Just a family vacation. Marcus watched Victoria with his daughter, the easy affection between them, the way Victoria listened to Sophie like she was the most interesting person in the world. And he knew this was the right moment, knew he couldn't wait another day. After dessert, while Sophie was distracted with her coloring book that Amelia had thoughtfully provided, Marcus reached across the table and took Victoria's hand. "I have something for you." His voice shook slightly. "It's not exactly an anniversary present, more like a statement of intent." Victoria's eyes widened as he pulled out the small velvet box. Around them, other diners began to notice. Conversations quieted, but Marcus only saw her. 2 years ago, I came to this restaurant with $47 and a heart full of fear. I thought I was looking for romance. Instead, I found someone who showed me I was worth seeing, worth helping, worth loving. His throat tightened with emotion. "You didn't just change my life, Victoria. You taught me I deserved a life worth living. You loved my daughter like she was yours from day one. You made us a family." He opened the box, revealing a simple ring, not extravagant. They'd chosen it together, Marcus and Sophie, finding something that felt right. A single stone set in platinum, elegant and understated. "Victoria Chen, will you marry me?" The restaurant held its breath. Victoria's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment she couldn't speak. Then she laughed, a sound of pure joy. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." The restaurant erupted. Applause, cheers strangers celebrating the love story they'd just witnessed. Amelia appeared with champagne on the house. Sophie abandoned her coloring to throw her arms around both of them. "Finally," Sophie declared. "I was wondering when you'd ask." "You knew," Marcus managed. "I picked out the ring with you last month, Daddy. Obviously I knew." Victoria slipped the ring on her finger, then pulled Marcus in for a kiss that tasted like tears and champagne, and the promise of forever. Later, as they walked home through downtown Portland, the October lights strung across trees creating a canopy of warmth above them. Sophie ran ahead, chasing fallen leaves. Marcus and Victoria walked slowly, arms around each other, savoring the moment. "Do you ever think about that night?" Marcus asked. "How close we came to missing this all the time. I think about what would have happened if I'd looked away instead of noticing you. If I'd decided your pain wasn't my business. If I'd let the opportunity for connection pass because it was easier than getting involved." Victoria stopped walking, turned to face him fully. "I think about how close I came to missing you, missing Sophie, missing this life we've built, and it terrifies me." "Me too. I almost didn't show up that night, you know. Almost canceled because I was so convinced it would be a disaster." "It was a disaster, just not the kind you expected." "No. It turned out to be the best disaster of my life." Marcus kissed her forehead, then her lips soft and certain. "Thank you for seeing me when I felt invisible." for staying when I gave you reasons to leave, for choosing us when you had every option in the world. Thank you for letting me in, for trusting that I meant it, for being brave enough to build something new instead of protecting yourself from hurt." Victoria smiled. "We're good together, Marcus. Different than either of us expected, but good." They caught up with Sophie, who was showing them a particularly beautiful leaf she'd found. The three of them walked home together, a family in every way that mattered, already planning the wedding. The wedding came in April, when Portland was green and alive with spring. They kept it small, intimate, just the people who mattered most. Jessica stood as maid of honor, crying happy tears from the moment the ceremony began. Marcus's construction crew attended Derek, sobbing openly in the third row. Victoria's employees filled half the chapel, celebrating the CEO who'd become human again. But it was Sophie who stole the show, walking down the aisle as flower girl in a purple dress she'd chosen herself, carrying a basket of petals and wearing the biggest smile Marcus had ever seen. The ceremony was at the Portland Japanese garden, surrounded by cherry blossoms and the sound of water. Victoria wore a simple cream dress that made her look ethereal. Marcus wore a suit that actually fit, purchased new for the occasion, and felt like someone he barely recognized. Someone who belonged here, someone who deserved this. When it came time for vows, Marcus's hands shook as he held Victoria's. 2 years ago, I had $47 in my wallet and a heart full of fear. I thought I was going to a restaurant to find romance. Instead, I found someone who showed me I was worth seeing, worth helping, worth loving. His voice broke. "You didn't just change my life, Victoria. You taught me I deserved a life worth living. You loved my daughter like she was yours from day one. You made us a family, and every day you choose us again. I promise to spend the rest of my life choosing you back." Victoria's vows were simpler, but no less powerful. "I thought I had everything: success, respect, financial security. But I was eating dinner alone almost every night, and I'd forgotten what it felt like to matter to someone." Tears streamed down her face. "Then I saw a man refusing to break in a crowded restaurant, and something in me shifted. You reminded me that success isn't measured in quarterly earnings. It's measured in love, in family, in the courage to let yourself be seen." She squeezed his hands. "You and Sophie gave me purpose. You gave me home. And I will spend every day of our marriage making sure you both know this: you matter. You have always mattered, and you always will." There wasn't a dry eye in the chapel. The reception was held at Bella Vista, full circle. The restaurant had closed for the afternoon, just for them, transforming into a space of celebration. The same table where Marcus had sat alone now held their wedding cake. The same window he'd stared through in desperation now framed their first dance. Marcus danced with Sophie first, her small feet standing on his shoes the way she used to when she was younger, both of them laughing. Then Victoria cut in, and all three of them danced together, Sophie between them, already the bridge that connected their separate histories into one shared future. Later, Jessica pulled Marcus aside, her mascara running from crying. "I'm so proud of you," she said, hugging him tight. "You deserve all of this, every single bit of happiness. I couldn't have done it without you, Jess. All those nights you watched Sophie. All those times you believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. That's what family does. We show up, we believe, we love even when it's hard." She pulled back, studying his face. "You look different. Lighter, like you finally put down something heavy you'd been carrying too long." "I did. I put down the belief that I wasn't enough, that I didn't deserve good things, that accepting help made me weak." Marcus glanced across the room where Victoria was talking with Sophie, both of them laughing at something. "They taught me different. taught me that strength is knowing when to let people carry part of the weight. The months after the wedding settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable. Marcus thrived at Cloud9 Solutions, promoted to operations director within a year. His insights about real work, real families, real struggles shaped company policy in ways that affected thousands of employees. The company was featured in multiple Best Places to Work lists, specifically calling out their family-friendly policies. Victoria finally understood that success wasn't measured in corner offices or accolades from industry publications. It was measured in family dinners and homework help, and Saturday mornings with people who loved you not for what you provided, but for who you were. Sophie flourished in ways that made Marcus's chest tight with pride. She joined the school robotics team, started a space club that met every Thursday, made friends easily, her confidence growing from being raised by two parents who believed she could do anything. One evening in December, 3 years after that first terrible date, Victoria came home from work to find Marcus and Sophie building a model rocket at the kitchen table. "It's for the science fair," Sophie explained without looking up from her careful work. "We're testing different fin configurations to see which provides the most stable flight. We're also making a mess." Marcus added glue on his fingers, a grin on his face. "But it's a good mess." Victoria kicked off her heels and joined them, her expensive work clothes forgotten as she helped Sophie attach fins to the rocket body. This was her life now. Glue and rocket parts, and a daughter who called her mom without the Vic prefix. A husband who'd finally stopped questioning whether he deserved to be happy. A home that smelled like dinner cooking and felt like belonging. "I have news," Victoria said as they worked. "Big news." Marcus looked up concerned. "Good news or bad news?" "Good news. Great news, actually. Cloud9 just closed a major deal with 3 hospital systems. We're expanding, adding 100 new positions." She paused. "The board wants to promote you to COO, Chief Operating Officer, full executive team, corner office, the whole thing." Marcus stared at her. "COO Victoria. I've only been at the company for 2 years. And in those 2 years, you've transformed how we operate. Employee retention is up 40%. Productivity is up. Costs are down. You've built systems that actually work for real people." Victoria smiled. "You've earned this, Marcus. Not because you're married to the CEO, because you're genuinely good at what you do." Sophie looked up from her rocket. "Does this mean Daddy gets an office as cool as yours?" "Cooler, probably. He actually has good taste." Victoria laughed. "What do you say, Marcus? Ready to be an executive?" "I say yes. But only if we can keep doing this." He gestured to the kitchen table, the rocket parts, the comfortable chaos of their evening. "The corner office doesn't matter if I lose this." "You won't lose this. We won't let you." Victoria leaned over and kissed him. "We're a team, remember? We keep each other grounded." Years passed. Sophie grew. At 10, she won the state science fair with a project on extremophiles and their implications for extraterrestrial life. At 12, she was accepted into a prestigious STEM program at Portland State University. At 15, she was applying to space camp and dreaming of NASA internships. Through it all, Marcus and Victoria were there. Every science fair, every robotics competition, every late-night study session. They showed up. They believed. They loved in ways that were steady and constant and transformative. Marcus's construction crew became regular guests at their house. Derek's daughter and Sophie became best friends. Jessica met someone at one of their dinner parties, a Cloud9 employee who appreciated her wit and kindness, and Marcus got to walk his sister down the aisle 2 years after his own wedding. Victoria's company continued to grow, but she never forgot the lessons Marcus and Sophie had taught her. That people mattered more than profits. That flexibility and trust produced better results than rigid control. That seeing employees as whole humans with complex lives made them more engaged, not less. On Sophie's 16th birthday, they took a family trip to Kennedy Space Center. Sophie stood in front of the Space Shuttle Atlantis and cried, overwhelmed by being so close to her dreams. Marcus stood behind her with his arms around Victoria, both of them watching their daughter fall in love with the stars all over again. "We did good," Victoria whispered. "We did," Marcus agreed. "We really did." That night in their hotel room, after Sophie was asleep, Victoria and Marcus sat on the balcony watching the Florida stars. "Do you remember when you thought you had nothing to offer me?" Victoria asked. Marcus laughed softly. "I was an idiot." "You were scared. There's a difference." She took his hand. "But look at what you've given me. A daughter who teaches me to see wonder in everything. A partnership that makes me better. A life that actually means something beyond quarterly reports and board meetings. You gave me everything that matters, Marcus, and you did it just by letting me in. You gave me the same thing. You taught me I was worth more than my bank account, that accepting help wasn't weakness, that love didn't keep score." Marcus pulled her close. "You taught me how to come home to myself." They sat in comfortable silence, the Florida night warm around them. Inside, Sophie dreamed of rockets and stars and a future bright with possibility. And Marcus thought about that November night 7 years ago, the worst night of his life that became the doorway to his best one. Sometimes the most broken moments crack us open to let the light in. Sometimes humiliation becomes the catalyst for transformation. Sometimes all it takes is one person deciding you matter and another person being brave enough to believe them. Marcus Hayes had walked into Bella Vista with $47 and crushing loneliness. He'd walked out with hope, with connection, with the first threads of a family that would define the rest of his life. Not because of grand gestures or dramatic rescues, but because someone had seen him when he felt invisible, and he'd let himself be seen. That was all it took. That was everything it took, and it was more than enough. Years later, Sophie Hayes would graduate top of her class from MIT with degrees in aerospace engineering and astrophysics. She'd intern at SpaceX, then NASA, then eventually work on the Mars colonization project. When reporters asked about her success, she always mentioned her parents, both of them. The father who'd sacrificed everything to raise her alone, and the mother who'd chosen them when she could have had anything. Marcus Hayes became one of the most respected COOs in the tech industry, known for his innovative approaches to work-life balance and his genuine care for employees. He spoke at conferences about leadership through empathy, about seeing people as humans instead of resources. He never forgot where he came from, never forgot what it felt like to be invisible. Victoria Chen's company became a model for humane corporate culture. They were profitable and principled, successful and soulful. She credited Marcus in every interview, never hiding that he was her partner in business and in life. That their love story had started with an act of kindness and grown into something that changed them both. But none of that mattered as much as the small moments. Family dinners around their kitchen table, Saturday morning pancakes with too much syrup, Sophie's drawings covering every surface of their home. The way Victoria still kept that first Saturn drawing in her office, now accompanied by dozens of others. The way Marcus still got choked up watching his daughter present her research, remembering the little girl who'd once asked him why the stars shone. Sometimes on quiet evenings they'd go back to Bella Vista, just the two of them, leaving Sophie with friends. They'd sit at their table by the window and remember the pain that brought them together, remember the choice to see each other, remember the courage it took to build something new from broken pieces. And they'd raise a glass to second chances, to kindness, to the revolutionary act of believing someone when they tell you that you matter, because that's all it took to change 3 lives forever. One moment of grace in a crowded restaurant. one decision to see instead of look away, one choice to believe in the possibility of more. Sometimes the best things in life start with the worst moments. Sometimes the family you need finds you when you've stopped believing anyone is looking. Sometimes all it takes is $47, a terrible date, and a stranger who decides that you deserve better. Marcus Hayes learned that night at Bella Vista that he was worth saving. But the truth was simpler and more beautiful than that. He'd always been worth it. He just needed someone to help him see. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below telling me about a time when someone's kindness changed your life. When someone saw you when you felt invisible. When a stranger became something more. Your story matters. Share it with us. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you never miss another story about the moments that change us, the choices that define us, and the love that saves us. Like this video if you believe in second chances, in the power of kindness, and the possibility that our worst moments can become doorways to our best ones. Because every view, every comment tells me that these stories matter, that they're traveling far and touching hearts, and that's exactly what they're meant to do. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing that everyone deserves to be seen.